Sean Diddy Combs has long been surrounded by some of the biggest names in music, but that day, inside a tense courtroom, no one was talking about chart-topping hits or platinum records. This was about something darker, a sprawling case built on accusations of abuse, sex trafficking, and criminal enterprise. And suddenly, two unexpected names were dropped into the record: Usher and Ne-Yo. The person who named them was Dawn Richard, a former singer from the girl group Danity Kane, once signed to Diddy's Bad Boy Records. She testified under oath. Her tone was calm, her story chilling. Dawn recounted an incident from back in 2010, a dinner at an upscale restaurant in West Hollywood. Elegant tables, hushed laughter, industry insiders. At the center, Diddy and Cassie. According to Dawn, that night turned violent. In the middle of a private exchange, Diddy allegedly stood up and punched Cassie in the stomach, in front of everyone. But what left the courtroom frozen was what came next. During cross-examination, the defense pressed her. Who else was there? And Dawn answered, Harve Pierre, Capricorn Clark, people from the label. And then, Usher, Ne-Yo, Jimmy Iovine. She couldn't recall every face, but those names she was sure of. They were there. The room fell silent. Icons of modern music. Was it just a coincidence? Were they there at the exact moment of the alleged assault? Did they see what Dawn described? She didn't say they witnessed it, but she placed them in the scene. This detail didn't go unnoticed. Former prosecutor Safa Robinson Ferrer, speaking on Law and Crime, made the nuance clear. She emphasized that the mention of Usher and Ne-Yo does not imply guilt, not at all. But their alleged presence does widen the circle of possible witnesses, people who might have seen or heard or simply confirmed who was there when everything spiraled. And here's where the strategy comes in. By forcing Dawn to mention those names only during cross-examination, the defense was striking at her credibility. Why didn't she say it earlier? Why leave out names that powerful? For the defense, that hesitation is a crack in her story. But for the jury, it raises something even more troubling. If these celebrities were really in that room, why didn't anyone speak up? In the rest of her testimony, Dawn Richard was pressed on the moment itself. She didn't describe it as something that happened in secret, behind closed doors. According to her, the violence occurred in the middle of a dinner, surrounded by producers, artists, and label executives. Yet, in her words, no one stepped in, no reaction, no protest, just silence, as if it were an unspoken rule. The prosecution asked her which Bad Boy employees were present that night. She listed names, insiders from the label. She insisted they saw it, and they said nothing. And when the defense asked why she hadn't mentioned celebrities like Usher or Ne-Yo from the start, she replied that she was simply repeating what she had already told the government. A response that, to Diddy's lawyers, felt conveniently incomplete. Former prosecutor Safa Robinson Ferrer saw it clearly. The defense was targeting her credibility. By showing that Dawn didn't tell the full story during her initial interviews, they opened the door for the jury to question everything she said, and in a trial this explosive, every word matters. But there's a deeper layer, one that lingers. Because the alleged presence of celebrities during such a violent moment raises a much broader question. If those powerful men were truly in that room, then their silence carries even more weight. It begs the question, will the supposed presence of Usher or Ne-Yo be brought up again later in the trial? Could they be called to testify? So far, neither of them has made any public comment on being named in court. No statement, no denial, nothing. And according to Safa Robinson Ferrer, that might be the smartest move. If she were Usher's lawyer today, she said, she would advise him to stay quiet. Because in her words, this isn't his fight. He's not accused of anything. His name was mentioned, but he's not under scrutiny, and any attempt to respond might only drag him deeper into a situation he can't control. Still, silence won't erase suspicion. In a case where every headline counts, where every name spoken becomes a trending topic, those who remain silent are never completely invisible. But beyond the tension surrounding the names mentioned, there's a deeper issue at play. Don Richards' testimony is not shocking simply because it mentions celebrities. It's because it fits into a larger pattern of violence, and that pattern could become central to the government's effort to prove something bigger, a structure, a method, a criminal enterprise. This case is not just about the relationship between Diddy and Cassie. The charges go far beyond domestic violence. The trial is built on accusations of sex trafficking by force, transportation across state lines for prostitution, and RICO, a law designed to take down organized criminal networks. And yet, much of what the jury has heard so far has centered on one theme: the abuse, the beatings, the humiliation Cassie allegedly endured. For former prosecutor Safa Robinson Ferrer, that's where the government faces a serious risk. Because by focusing too heavily on domestic violence, even as disturbing as it is, they might lose sight of what they need to prove: the existence of a structured criminal organization with multiple victims, coordinated acts, and an underlying system. So far, the trial has barely touched on crucial evidence like financial records, private jet itineraries, or hotel bookings for potential victims, all of which could support the sex trafficking allegations. Cassie's testimony, delivered early in the trial, hit hard, but Don Richards' account, by corroborating specific moments, adds resonance. She's not the central victim. She's the witness, the one who was there, the one who can confirm. But the defense didn't stop at casting doubt. They pushed her to reveal something more uncomfortable: that after allegedly witnessing these violent moments, Dawn continued to work with Diddy. She joined another one of his groups, Diddy Dirty Money. She stayed close. She performed. She collaborated. She shared the stage. That contradiction is exactly what the defense is leaning on. Because in the minds of the jury, a quiet question begins to form. If she saw all this, why did she stay? And if she stayed, can we believe everything she says? But this trial isn't just about testimony. With each passing day, the strategies on both sides become clearer. And on this seventh day in court, marked by the unexpected naming of Usher and Ne-Yo, a new layer of tension emerged. The defense appears to be widening its scope, hunting for inconsistencies, gray areas, and silences. They're not outright denying the violence. They're not denying the screaming, the hits, the humiliation described. What they're seeking is a sliver of doubt, an unspoken detail, a conveniently forgotten presence, a name that wasn't mentioned until later. And that's how celebrity names become tools, not to accuse, but to destabilize the testimony and cloud the narrative in the jury's mind. By bringing up Usher, Ne-Yo, and Jimmy Iovine, the defense is playing a calculated card, shifting the focus away from Diddy's actions and toward the credibility of the witnesses. Because once you doubt a witness, you begin to question everything they've said. And in a trial of this magnitude, it's not enough to persuade. You must erase all reasonable doubt. In this strategy, another name has surfaced repeatedly: Kid Cudi. The artist, a former boyfriend of Cassie, reportedly had his car destroyed under suspicious circumstances. Some claim it was retaliation from Diddy. Others call it rumor. So far, nothing has been confirmed in court. But the name is circulating, and speculation is growing. Justin Bieber, for his part, has already made it clear he won't testify. He's distancing himself, just like many other celebrities whose names float around the case without ever formally appearing in the record. That's another dimension of this trial: the gravitational pull of big names. They're not always directly involved, but even a brief mention in the courtroom narrative sends shockwaves through the media, the public, and the jury's perception. Meanwhile, the government pushes forward. They've promised more concrete evidence, documents, travel records, financial flows, private flights between states. They'll need to prove that women were knowingly transported as part of a larger system, a pattern. And for that, testimony alone won't be enough. What this trial is revealing, day by day, is something far more extensive than many expected. It's no longer just about whether Diddy was violent with Cassie. It's about proving the existence of a system, a network of influence, fear, and silence, a structure in which some people were allegedly reduced to passive observers or silent victims. But to establish a RICO case, the prosecution must go further. They need to connect the individual acts to a coordinated criminal enterprise. Testimony alone isn't enough. It has to fit into a larger pattern, a strategy, a flow of money, a method of control. And so far, that puzzle remains incomplete. The alleged presence of Usher, Ne-Yo, and other celebrities during some of these events could, in theory, offer the government a narrative advantage to show that the violence wasn't hidden, that it happened openly with a sense of impunity, that Diddy's power was so absolute he could act and no one dared intervene. That's a powerful image, one that, in a RICO trial, could help establish a climate of domination. But that strategy comes with risk, because unless those celebrities are called to the stand, their mere mention could backfire. It could be seen as a ploy for headlines, a distraction from the legal core of the case, a move meant to stir public attention, not a matter of proof. And yet, inside that courtroom, under the weight of silence, every name spoken carries force. Usher, Ne-Yo, Jimmy Iovine, Kid Cudi. Even if they're not accused, even if they say nothing, even if they distance themselves. Because this trial isn't just about one man, it's also about an era, about an industry, and about all the silences it allowed to echo for far too long. Diddy's name now sits at the center of a trial that goes beyond the man and beyond the music. What this case is beginning to expose is the possibility that a system existed, operating under the spotlight, in the backstage corridors of a glittering but often silent industry. And if certain names are now surfacing in witness accounts, it's not to accuse. It's to remind us that silence, too, can be part of the problem, that seeing and saying nothing can become a quiet kind of complicity. The trial continues. So do the revelations. And one question remains: who truly knew and who chose to stay silent?